What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. I get asked a lot about different prisons in California. Having done over 24 years in the California Department of Corrections, I've been to several different prisons. One of the prisons that's pretty notorious here in California is Corcoran. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's only been because of the shoe. And I have been there. Corcoran shoe was where the Gladiator fights or rooster fights were held. But the roosters were men. And the people placing the bets were guards, were cops, were COs. See, the thing that would do there is COs would have, Northerners in their building that could fight really good. And they would tell their buddy in another building, yeah, I got these Northerners over here that'll beat up the Southerners you got. And his buddy had already probably bragged about the Southerners, or maybe it was Crips or Bloods. But Corcoran shoe was known. They would find the best fighters from whatever faction, and they would actually move them around and place bets on who was going to win. And once they realized, like, all right, man, you won, then they would start shooting at them. Most of the time with the block gun, sometimes with the Mini 14. And these men, they were going out to the yards, fighting for their lives, fighting for their pride, fighting for their faction, and then sometimes getting killed because of it. And every time these men went out there, they knew it could be the last time. And they went out there like, let's do it. I went to Corcoran shoe, and when I got there, the feds had already came in. The FBI was investigating the setting up of fights. Supposedly, I'm assuming the CDC was faking that they were investigating it. And so when I got there in 1998. I was on my way from Tehachapi, Adseg, Hole, whatever you want to call it. I was on my way back to Pelican Bay Shoe. And they decided that they were going to drop me off in Corcoran Shoe for 4 months on a layover. 4-month layover. Because Pelican Bay was packed. And they had, in 98, they were deciding they were gonna change Tehachapi to a shoe. And they had this rule where if you had already been to Pelican Bay, and if your shoe term was 2 years or more, you couldn't be in Corcoran shoe or Tehachapi shoe. They wanted all the long-term shoe guys, and those that had already been there, they wanted them all in Pelican Bay. They didn't want guys that had been in Pelican Bay to be in Corcoran shoe and, according to them, fomenting violence, bringing a specific type of politicking to the shoe. And so I was there for 4 months. And I can tell you that when I was there was 6 of us, and there was still group yard. However, when I got there, the whole bottom tier, I went to 482 right. The whole bottom tier in 482 right was Southerners and whites. The whole top tier was Northerners, blacks, and others, right? When we would go to yard, it was broken down the same way. Oh, excuse me. The Bulldogs also were on the bottom tier with the Southerners and the whites. And when we went to yard, it was the Southerners, the whites, and the Bulldogs that went to yard together. And the other yards were just like the tier, the blacks, the Northerners, and the others. Okay. So we would still go out there to group yard, and, things would still happen, but it was more in-house stuff. I can tell you that it was the pettiest prison out of anywhere I had ever been in over 24 years in the California Department of Corrections, it was the pettiest prison I had ever been in. On our yard group, there was probably 15, 20 dudes assigned to our yard. 6 of us were level 4s. Everyone else was a level 1, level 2, maybe a level 3. The shoot terms they had were months long. Coming from a level 4 180, you never saw anybody transfer out. If they had a 6-month shoe, they did it in ad seg. They didn't take up shoe space. But we had guys there, and it was funny because the level 4s that were on the yard, the 6 of us that were on the yard, were the most laid back dudes on the yard. It was the level 1s and the level 2 dudes, the homies that were level 1 and level 2, that were walking around peacocking with their chest out the farthest, walking the hardest, acting the hardest. And the 6 of us would laugh at him. Say, check him out, eh? That vato's killer. He probably put some dirt in a sock and slapped somebody with it. He got a serious shoot term. He'd be out in about 2 days. And I actually had to give somebody a verbal tongue lashing in the shoe, because I had to remind him, like, homie, like, you didn't do anything serious, so stop acting so hardcore, because things can get ugly here very fast. Oh, hey, homie, I apologize. I didn't mean nothing. No, I know. That's why I'm talking to you. You know, it's okay. It was a different type of prison compared to what it had been. Don't get me wrong. And another thing in Corcoran, most of the hits that went down there, for some reason, they would always use razors. They would always get their hands on razors, and they would use razors because in Corcoran shoe, they wouldn't pick up a case if it was a razor blade. They would pick up the case if you brought a piece out and whacked them. So there were dudes getting hit with pieces, but most of the stuff was razoring people up, which was a trip because I believe it was 1995 or 1996, word had come down. But this was on the main line that no razors were to be used, that anyone using a razor was going to be disciplined. The reason for that being, unless it's a box cut or a carpet knife blade, you're not going to kill anybody. And so it was frowned upon and looked at as that's a PC move. You're putting a mark on a dude so the cops have to get him off the yard, but you're not really trying to kill him. If somebody got to get touched, then you try to take their wind. So it was a trip that in Corcoran, it was a lot of razor blades, right? The cops would write you up for working out in a group in the shoe. It was a trip. I had never seen anything like that. Under escort, the cop would grab you by your elbow and escort you. I remember the first time I exited my cell and I was going to the yard. I had already been to Pelican Bay shoe. And when they went to escort me from my cell to the yard, when I came, because you have to come out of the cell backwards and then turn around. So when I came out of the cell backwards and I went to turn around, the officer put his hand on my elbow and I snatched my arm from him. I told him, "What are you doing, man?" And he was like, "I'm escorting you." And I said, "Tell me where to go and I'll get there. You don't got to put your hands on me." And he's like, "Hey, look, this is just a procedure here." Trip me out. Pelican Bay, they ain't touching you. They're going to chain you up and tell you, "Let's go." And then you walk. I remember there was a workout in cell, and when they would be counting off, and I remember looking up and seeing in the tower the cop setting up the tripod, and then he put the camera and he panned to every cell on the bottom tier. And then in a couple days, we all received a 115, a write-up for a group exercise, calling out cadence, I remember. And that's a 115. That's a write-up they always try to use whenever they try to validate somebody and say you're participating in gang activities. You're just working out. I couldn't stand that place. But you see the thumbnail? You see the cell? That was the bottom tier. The bottom tier was called bedrock. 2 concrete bunks side by side. The top tier had bunk beds. So all the Southerners, whites, and Bulldogs, they were downstairs on bedrock and 482 right. That back cell, that wall, you see that narrow window, and I'll put it up too so you guys can see it as I'm talking. You have that window right there. We would cover it. I don't know if the sun was setting or rising on the back wall of my cell when I was in Corcoran Shoe, but I'll tell you what, it felt like the sun was in my cell. The sun would beat on that wall, and you see the wall is concrete, the cell is concrete, the whole entire, everything is concrete except the toilet, which is stainless steel. And that wall and those concrete slabs that were our bunks, they were just absorbing all day. They were absorbing the heat of the sun that was beating on that back wall, and would cover up that little narrow window, trying to keep some of the heat out through there because it could come through there easier. But our bunks were hot. We'd have our mattresses rolled up, like you see the guy in that picture rolled up his mattress. We'd have the mattress rolled up, and we'd have a sheet laid down on the concrete, and we'd be sweating our asses off. We didn't feel no air. You would get up and you would bird bath. You know, you'd sit at the sink and throw water on yourself, soap up, throw water on yourself, rinse off. And as you're picking up the water from the floor, you're dripping sweat. Chow would come around. Food actually tasted okay in Corcoran Shoe, I'll say that. But they fed us portions that were for a child. So you had inadequate meal portions. You had extreme heat. And so guys had short fuses. The strength wasn't up to par. I mean, your body can get used to it. Everybody's boxers, because you just wore your boxers all day. Everybody's boxers would get a yellowish tinge because they were full of sweat. No matter how much you washed them, that sweat wasn't going anywhere. You go out to the yard, play some handball, make sure you shower out there, have some conversations, see if anything's jumping off on the yard. I couldn't wait to leave that spot. Even though there was group yard, even though you got to see the sun and some sunshine, I said, man, this place is so damn hot and so petty. I need to go back to the bay. The bay with no windows anywhere in the hallways. You walk in Pelican Bay Shoe and it felt like you went underground. You went into a bunker. You went in that place and it was so damn quiet, your ears start ringing. I embraced that more than I did Corcoran Shoe. Couldn't stand that place. I'm glad it's shut down. I'm glad Pelican Bay Shoe was shut down. I'm glad that people aren't being stuck in the hole, in the shoe forever, based off of somebody else's lies or a cop's observation. And that cop, believe me, somebody had left a comment recently and they said they were trying to school me on the rules of validating people and how it was fair and all this stuff. And I'm like, I was there. It wasn't fair. When the cops had a hard-on for somebody they didn't like anymore, somebody they didn't like, period, somebody who they felt stood up to them and had too much respect on the yard, the cops would do their magic, do their thing, slam that guy down. He's too much of a man. He got to go. I talked about the other day, and I'll end this on this. I talked about the other day how when I would hit the yard, I had friends of mine, I had camaradas of mine that I would look out for, that were validated, that were stuck in the shoe for life because the cops felt they were too much of an influence. And I'm not talking just about legends. I'm talking about camaradas, dudes who were really with it, dudes who were really sacrificing. And because of the violence that they were doing, because violence is a way of life in there, they were slammed down and they were told they were going to die in Pelican Bay Shoe. These guys couldn't hustle. They couldn't make no money. And I recognized that and I was like, I got you, Holmes. Don't even trip. And I would hit a yard, boom. And I would sell some dope. I took care of the legends I was supposed to. And I took care of my camaradas. It's a cold world, man. I tell you guys all the time, it's not a world you want to be in. That's my video for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, man. I'm out of here.